We spend so much time obsessing over how to transfer wealth, trusts, wills, tax strategies. But today, in this explainer, we're going to expose something much deeper. We're looking at the hidden psychological architecture behind generational wealth. We're going to uncover how families unknowingly shape the entire financial destiny of future generations, not through bank accounts, but through silent, emotional scripts.
I want you to just picture this visceral, kind of unsettling scene for a second. A father is sitting silently at the dinner table, just staring at a stack of unpaid bills. He says absolutely nothing. But across the room, his child notices everything. They feel the tension in his breathing, the anxiety just radiating off of him. Look, long before that child understands what a budget or a mortgage even is, they are absorbing your parents' financial anxiety. They're silently downloading a survival mode nervous system. And honestly, this is the terrifying reality we have to confront. Children inherit financial psychology way, way before they ever inherit financial assets. This early emotional conditioning, it actually becomes their adult financial identity. So decades later, that same child, now an adult, might feel this sudden intense spike of panic when their bank account drops even slightly. Not because someone sat them down and explicitly taught them to be terrified of money, but because fear was literally the native financial language of their childhood home.
Which brings us to this fascinating concept we call the dinner table business school. Kids learn from invisible emotional observation, not explicit instruction. A parent can say money is important all day long, but if the household is constantly operating in chaos, having emotional arguments about bills, expressing deep fear around risk, or just showing impulsive behavior, the child learns something entirely different. They learn that money simply equals fear.
Okay, moving on to Section 1, Scarcity versus Abundance, the two languages.
Let's look at the sharp contrast between these two realities. On one side, you have the language of scarcity. Money is always running out. Risk is dangerous. Security is fragile. This type of conditioning internalizes fear, anxiety, and even guilt around wealth. But on the other side, we have the language of abundance. Families speaking this language teach their kids to associate money with strategy, creation, and possibility. Money is a tool. Opportunities exist everywhere. It's just an entirely different frequency.
And here's a realization that explains so much about human behavior. Scarcity becomes identity. Let that sink in for a second. Even after someone's external reality changes, like even if their income skyrockets, if their internal childhood programming hasn't changed, they're going to remain psychologically poor. They stay trapped in scarcity thinking, completely self-sabotaging their success, all because their nervous system is still expecting survival mode.
And this brilliantly illustrates why most people never build generational wealth. Average households teach their children a labor mindset. They focus entirely on salaries, consumption, short-term comfort. They literally teach their children how to work for money. Legacy families, though, they teach an ownership mindset. They focus on businesses, equity, compounding assets. They're teaching their kids how to make money work completely independently.
All right, let's shift to Section 2, the psychology of compounding.
So we usually think of compounding as just, a mathematical formula on a spreadsheet. But we really need to reframe it. Compounding is actually a deep, grueling psychological test. It's the practice of absolute patience, delayed gratification, and emotional discipline. Remember that survival mode nervous system we were just talking about? A survival-minded person naturally prioritizes immediate gratification purely because they need to relieve emotional discomfort right now. Compounding demands the exact opposite of that. Reflect on this profound shift for a moment. The emotionally reactive mind asks, what relieves discomfort now? It desperately needs visible, immediate rewards. But the wealthy mindset asks, what creates leverage later? Wealthy families don't think in paychecks, they think in decades. They are constantly, intentionally exchanging short-term pleasure for long-term freedom. This brings us to a really hard truth. Identity always overrides knowledge. You can read every single finance book in the world. You can know all the principles intellectually. But if your nervous system expects limitation and chaos, you will sabotage your own wealth. This is exactly why financial literacy alone is never enough. If your emotional identity is tied to scarcity, your behavior is eventually going to pull your bank account right back down to match your comfort zone. Which takes us to Section 3, Risk and Emotional Regulation. Poor financial conditioning constantly screams at us to avoid uncertainty at all costs. But wealth-building conditioning teaches us to understand uncertainty. Average investors let fear totally destroy their returns. They panic sell at the absolute bottom of a market cycle because their emotions just take the wheel.
True wealth builders, however, understand that every market fluctuates. They know that emotional regulation, the simple ability to sit on your hands and stay calm, is actually their greatest financial advantage. Financial calm is inherited behavior. Just think about the gravity of that statement. When children witness their parents making composed, highly strategic decisions during economic setbacks, when they see calm instead of panic, they are gaining enormous long-term leverage. They learn that market drops aren't the end of the world. They're just data. In fact, they're just opportunities. Now, here's a rather shocking reality. Roughly 70% of wealthy families lose their wealth by the second generation. And it doesn't disappear because of bad luck or massive market crashes. It disappears because the psychological framework needed to sustain it was never passed down. If you pass down millions of dollars, but you completely fail to pass down discipline, patience, emotional intelligence, and stewardship, well, that wealth is doomed. Because money amplifies psychology. Let that sink in for a second. Money is essentially just a magnifying glass. If you're an anxious person, money is going to make you more anxious. If you're impulsive, money will make you destructively impulsive. A financially immature mind will rapidly destroy enormous wealth if they inherit the money without inheriting the self-control and the core identity required to actually manage it.
And that leads us to our final part, Section 4, Building Sovereign Bloodlines. The true inheritance you leave behind, it isn't an investment portfolio. It really isn't. It's mindset, it's emotional stability, strategic thinking, self-control, and long-term vision. A strong family financial culture naturally normalizes talking about investing, managing risk, and staying accountable. Because if you arm a child with those psychological traits, they can rebuild wealth repeatedly. Even if they lose everything, even after massive failure, they can build it back. That is what true resilience looks like. So I want to challenge you right now to look in the mirror and ask yourself this. What language is your family speaking today? Because the invisible stories, the passing little comments, the physiological reactions your children are absorbing at the dinner table right now, those will absolutely become the financial destiny of your descendants. True wealth isn't built in bank accounts. It is built in emotional conditioning. It's built right there in the nervous system. It's time we stop passing down survival. It's time to stop passing down fear. And it is time to start passing down the psychological framework for absolute freedom. Thanks for joining me for this explainer. I'll leave you with one final question to ask yourself. What invisible legacy are you leaving at the dinner table tonight?